me to the concept of why do we fall sometimes? Sometimes we fall because it teaches us humility. You know, have you ever known a person, or maybe you were a person, who is kind of like, especially when we start becoming really religious, maybe when we first enter Islam or really start practicing, and we're like on top of our game. You know that? That like high in the sky spiritual high? Maybe it happens like after Ramadan or after you went for Hajj or something. You're on a spiritual high. Sometimes when you're in that state, you can become a little arrogant. You can become a little self-righteous. You know what that looks like? Anyone? Like the haram police type thing. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're put on this earth to change everyone else because you're already perfect. You know what I'm talking about? That's arrogance, because you're not perfect. And no matter how many prayers you're making, and no matter how much you're standing up for tahajjud, and no matter how much Quran you memorized, you will never be perfect. And you will always have flaws. And so the problem is that sometimes we become arrogant. And beyond that is that we sometimes take credit for our own righteousness. You know, the mistake that Qarun made, Qarun was a man who lived, very, very wealthy man who lived at the time of Musa alayhi salam. And the mistake that Allah tells us in the Quran that he made is he took credit for his power, his riches, his wealth. He said, إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُهُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. I got all of this from a knowledge in me. See, he took credit for his blessings. He took credit for his gifts. And sometimes when we are practicing, when we are, we feel like, I'm religious, did you see what I did? Like we feel proud. And don't get me wrong, we should feel good about obedience. But I'm talking about something else. When we take credit for it and we feel arrogance, we feel it's because I'm just amazing, It's because I'm awesome, and see all these little people around me, they're not quite as awesome as me. Do you know what I'm talking about? And maybe those little people are at the masjid, and maybe those little people are in our home, maybe they're in our family, but it's to look down on other people. That is arrogance. That's the definition of arrogance. And so sometimes we fall to teach us humility. And that individual who is arrogant, and that individual who's taking credit for their righteousness and looking down at others and judging others and ridiculing others, often they will slip. And they will end up sometimes in the same place that they were previously ridiculing. Make sense? It's very dangerous to not show gratitude for the gifts of Allah. And the greatest gift of Allah is hidayah, is guidance. So if you are guided, if your children are guided, if your family is guided, don't think it's because you're awesome and everyone else isn't. Realize that it is a ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a gift. You know the word hidayah means guidance, it also means gift. So it's a gift. All right? So this is one of the things that sometimes happens when we fall then. A lot of people become more humble after they fall. They become more, they realize that they're human, you know what I mean? They're not like they're not like a superhero, that they're not superhuman, that they're not angels. And so in that sense, this slip actually humbles you. Ibn al-Qayyim has a very powerful statement in which he says that there are some people who they do a good deed, and because of that good deed, they end up going to hell. And some people who commit a sin, and because of that sin, they end up going to heaven. Why? And then he explains. He says that that person who did the good deed, because of that deed, he may have become arrogant. And so that arrogance actually led him downward. And that person who committed the sin, because of that sin, they felt so much remorse, so much humility, that they repented to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so sincerely that they ended up going to Jannah. Do you understand? So it's very, very important that we change our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the fruits of difficulty and hardship is it teaches us compassion. It teaches us something called empathy. When you've been down, when you've faced struggle, you become more compassionate towards others who are facing struggle. You become more empathetic. You feel more for others if you've been through it, or you've been through something like it. And if you look at the prophets, peace be upon them all, when you look at Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, look at how much he went through. From the time he was born, he was dealing with tragedy. From the time he was born, he was dealing with loss. His father was already dead, had already passed away when he was born. And then his mother when he was a child. And then his grandfather. Do you understand the amount of loss? He was an orphan from when he was a child. And so he dealt with loss from the beginning. What did that teach the Prophet ﷺ? It made the Prophet ﷺ, it taught him that empathy and that compassion because he himself had been through it. He himself had been an orphan. So when he reaches out to orphans, he knows what that's like. He had dealt with loss, alayhi salatu wasalam.